Hello and welcome to another spoiler episode of Umineko. I'm going to be talking about spoilers for the entire game. Do not watch this if you haven't played the whole thing, read the whole story. It won't make sense to you, even if you think you don't care about spoilers. This video is going to cover my parts 4 through 6 of episode 2 of my Let's Play, which basically covers the span of time, the aftermath of Kanon's date with Jessica, the setup of the board, everyone arriving, scenes with Rosa and Maria, and then some of the early leading into the dinner and the first move that Beatrice effectively makes. Content warnings in this episode: there is going to be discussion of child abuse. I will have timestamps for that section. And on screen there will be text labeling the fact that that is the section dealing with the topic. But first we're going to talk about the aftermath of Jessica's act at her school festival. And before we get to Kanon specifically, there's one moment with Natsuhi and Crest at the dinner table that is a little bit sad, but is also very relevant to Beatrice, Shannon, Kanon in particular. Briefly, when Natsuhi says Jessica did a good job, Jessica's caught off guard and flattered and very happy because she thinks Natsuhi is praising her for her stage performance, which Natsuhi didn't see, because if she did, Natsuhi would be vehemently opposed to it, because that is not behavior fitting of the head of the Ashuramiya family or the heir of the Ashuramiya family. So Jessica has a moment of like, oh my god, she did see it and she liked it, before quickly realizing, no, that's impossible. That outcome cannot happen. There is just no way it would. So obviously, and as she realizes what Natsuhi is saying, she realizes Natsuhi is just talking about her giving a speech at the start, which Jessica didn't care about in the slightest. The part that's important is that Jessica for a moment experiences a happiness and validation of being allowed to be the person she wants to be, before realizing, of course, Natsuhi wasn't there. And that this connects to a kind of disappointment she felt that Natsuhi didn't come to her stage show, which is a strange feeling, because at the same time she's relieved Natsuhi didn't come, because she knows the outcome, if Natsuhi saw it, would not be good. Natsuhi would be scolding her and telling her to stop doing that and trying to redirect her energy away from the things she cares about. And so Jessica's kind of caught in an awkward place where she knows she can't have the thing she wants. She wants to both be Jessie, do music and play on stage, but more importantly for her parents to accept, validate, and support her in that. And she knows that's not going to happen. She knows there's actually no world in which it does happen, which is why she specifically does all of her music in school, and even makes an effort to not even attempt to do music stuff at home where it would be detected by her parents. She makes a very specific separation of selves. As she talks about, she has made Jessie as a different self inside of her that can be the person she wants to be. And this is pretty tragic for Jessica. But what's more tragic is that this is an opportunity and a privilege that Jessica has that Kanon, Shannon, Beatrice, they don't have. I talked about this before with Shannon, but none of them have a life off of Rakanjima. They don't have the ability to escape away to be this other person. Maybe, at the very least, that is where this episode has positioned things so far, and that's definitely in line with how Kanon feels, as someone who feels he cannot be more than furniture. The rest of the episode may go some way to refuting the idea that they don't have the ability to do this, but at least in this moment, and especially if you think about the conditions they live as servants of the Ashuramiya family and the restrictions that puts upon their ability to move and exist as they would like to be, this is just not an opportunity available to them. And obviously this also connects to the idea of Beatrice or Yasu, any person who attempts to say, I am Kinzo's grandchild, and attempts to actually take their place as part of the Ashuramiya family. That there is no way that could happen. In the same way, I believe it is not directly addressed this, because it's so early it's hard to, but there is a deep yearning that Yasu could be Lion from episode 7, who is the only time that the only fragment, the only universe, the only possible thread in which the Ashuramiya family accepts them, and accepts them into the family, and does not then does not suspect foul play, does not suspect manipulation or trickery, or even if they think it's true, doesn't then go to try and disprove it for their own reasons. So in that way, Jessica's sadness here about wanting to be recognized but knowing it would never go well parallels a kind of yearning that Yasu has. In a way, you could certainly see how Yasu has done the opposite of what Jessica has done and has presented alternative selves instead to shield themselves against being recognized and the fallout that would occur as a result. Now coming to Kanon's specific response, this is heartbreaking again in a different way. I like Kanon a lot. I can relate a lot to this boy who does not know how to express his feelings, and the specific struggle here that is really difficult is him being on the precipice of understanding that he can be more than furniture. Just like Shannon, it is not a simple task for him to just become more than furniture, and it is not an unobstructed, easy, obstacle-free path. But it is open to him, and Jessica is reaching out to him, and quite passionately trying to make him see that. But he steps back because he has the cynical point of view about these things, where he knows all of the obstacles. He knows exactly how poorly it will go, and perhaps correctly, he's sure that it will never lead to happiness for either of them. Again, the outcome in which Lion gets to exist is the only fragment, is the only fragment possible where that result happens. There is only one time ever where they have that kind of supportive relationship with Lion. So in a similar vein, it is hard to imagine there being any, or at least not many, fragments where Kanon could be with Jessica without the family interfering, preventing things, undermining their lives together. And there's a tragic gap here where Jessica is aware that there's a gap in understanding, where she doesn't know the kind of life Kanon has lived, but she so little realizes how different a life Kanon has lived, what Kanon's existence is, how Kanon was born. There's so much there that she cannot fathom, and that Kanon does not trust her to understand, even if he tried to explain it. That it's very easy for him to dismiss what she's telling him. What she's telling him is still true, despite the difference in their situation, or at the very least, is arguably true. But he just simply cannot see it, and he knows that there's a good reason why she might feel differently, or not as passionate about it, if she knew the truth of the situation. Specifically lines like Jessica saying, "We are all human, aren't we?" She doesn't understand the ways in which Kanon is not a person who was human until being hired by the Ashuramiya family and was then reduced to the status of furniture. Kanon sees himself as having always been furniture, never being a full human existence. And she can't fathom the reasons for that because he has not tried to explain it to her. And in some ways, there's an interesting line here where it says Kanon felt envious about seeing the feelings Jessica had on stage, and specifically, he tricked himself out of that emotion. He'd called himself furniture over and over. Now, if he's tricking himself out of that emotion, there's an extent to which, too, his response here is not necessarily what he wants to do, but what he feels he should or must do. It's not that he doesn't connect to Jessica expressing herself on the stage. It's not that he doesn't want to take Jessica's hand, that she's reaching out to him, but that he feels he has to snub her because he doesn't think any good will come of trying. He thinks that this kind of yearning will only lead to pain because it will inevitably fail. Shannon is interesting because she somewhat feels the same way. She somewhat suspects that they will not actually be able to be together, but that the moment of being engaged is still an expression of love worthwhile, that she's going to do it. Again, this is the kind of difference with Kanon's cynical perspective. There's also a real irony to Jessica trying to emphatically suggest to Kanon that he could create another himself. Another him that could be himself and that could connect to her, even if he also still has to be the servant, the furniture, Kanon. And there's the irony there because while, in a sense, Kanon has already been another self that was created, she's still not wrong that Kanon could create another Kanon. Shannon made Seo, who gets to date George and gets to leave the island and go and see the fish with him. Kanon could do the same, and we will see him later reach a level of development where he does embrace that. But he's not yet ready for it. And then one line that I think is going to be relevant for a little bit later in this video is Kanon at one point says, "Even if I looked like a bird, I'd be nothing more than a domestic duck. Even though they have wings, they cannot fly." But there's another meaning in this I'm reading where Kanon is saying that if he had wings, he would not be considered a bird. He would be considered a duck. There's an important through line in general, but especially in these few videos, where presenting and passing as something are very important to having that truth recognized. In a sense here, Kanon is saying that if people didn't see him as a bird, then he just simply would not be one. And in a way, you could refute... Theoretically, Jessica could have refuted that and said, "You simply aren't. You would be a bird. You would have the wings. You would just be able to accept that. I would see you as a bird." But Kanon can't refuse that because Kanon is very aware of the ways in which people would perceive things in that way, and again, cynical about how people would perceive things in that way. And I think importantly, if a single person said that's a duck and not a bird, Kanon would feel that much more than even if 20 other people said, "Oh, that's a bird." And then after this meeting, we have Beatrice come back. And Beatrice taunts Kanon and has a lot of fun at his expense. In a way that I find very odd, because last time we saw Beatrice, she was actually being quite friendly with Shannon, and she was being in some ways quite childish and not menacing really. And Kanon purports that this is an act and that Beatrice is a purely evil woman who only wants to see them fail and flounder. I think what's happening in this scene is that how Kanon feels about Beatrice is pulling her character in that way. When we saw the very friendly and amicable Beatrice before, that was Shannon's understanding of a witch that had allowed her to have an opportunity to be with the man she loved. And of course, she then finds Beatrice quite charming and harmless. But Kanon, eternally suspicious, especially of the idea that this opportunity is just a poison pill, then imbues the idea that Beatrice is toying with them knowing the result of their fate. And I don't think Beatrice was ignorant of the bad odds or difficulties ahead of Shannon and George, and she didn't really talk about them in that case. But it didn't feel like in those scenes that was because she was concealing an ulterior motive where she was planning to undermine them. A funny detail, and again, maybe this is just Beatrice being manipulative in different ways, but when talking to Shannon, Beatrice says, "I don't expect anything in return," and does ask for a favor. However, to Kanon, she straight up says, "Did you think I'd lend you my power and ask for nothing in exchange?" Again, there's a very cynical kind of not even exchange there, because it is not that she is expected to do, it's not that he is expected to do something for Beatrice. It's that Beatrice is doing this only to extract her enjoyment from the torture of the situation. And a question that I don't know if I have a definitive answer to, Beatrice, when taunting Kanon, says, "2 seeds of love have been sown. Including the one that has already been sown, that makes 3. So what's the seed that has already been sown? Based on what comes later, I'm assuming this is about Battler and his original sin. That seems like it would be most relevant for Beatrice, and in a way also humanizes the kind of hurt Beatrice has in this situation. Beatrice is cynical, as is Kanon, but Beatrice has a kind of cynicism, I feel like, where she has experienced bad things, and so she is insistent that those are the results everyone else will get. Her love was doomed and painful, and her partner did not see it through and did not really respect her or understand the situation. So she projects that ending fate to everyone else. She insists that George is going to find a person in a marriage meeting that perfectly suits him and then have to go with them instead of with Shannon. What's different is, again, we don't actually see an end result of this, but I believe George is a person who would stick to his promises better than Battler would. Whether or not that means a happily ever after is a different question, but that Beatrice asserts a kind of cynical certainty that comes from her own past experiences. Moving on from there, we unfortunately need to talk about Maria and Rosa. This is the section where we'll be discussing child abuse. Just to flag that, I don't think I'll necessarily be going in depth on it in a way that I won't be trying to dwell on details or anything especially uncomfortable in that way, but be aware that also I will have scenes from this section playing in the background as I talk. Rosa is such a bad parent. This section in particular really highlights her failures and how she has perpetuated a cycle that abusive people sometimes fall into. Rosa will get frustrated for reasons that are not to do with Maria. In this case, she is running late because she is stressed about having to choose an outfit for Maria that is suitable for the family conference. Now, very loosely, you could suggest that Maria's fault here is that she doesn't seem mature in her behavior, so Rosa is attempting to dress her in a way that makes her feel more mature and more her age. Heavy quotation marks there. But the source of the stress and trauma here is her family, the expectations put upon her, her experiences as being the youngest, being undermined, being condescended to, always being talked down to as if, always being assumed to be the child who doesn't have a strong will or doesn't have a lot of skills, anything to bring to the table. And in a strange way, Rosa is almost vicariously stressed about the idea that Maria is failing in the same ways as her, and how that reflects on Maria as a parent. All of this to say, Rosa is stressed for reasons that are not Maria's fault, even slightly, but Rosa will certainly blame Maria because Maria is a target Rosa can address. Maria is a target Rosa has control over, that she can directly deal with and physically deal with, in a way that she can't slap Kraus, she can't chew out her grandfather, who originated many of the traumas and stresses of her family life, but she can do those things to Maria, especially because Rosa often will exhibit a kind of authoritarian control of Maria as her daughter, her family. She feels entitled to do what she wants with Maria. There's a bit that talks about Rosa relenting when Maria was asking for things persistently and crying or screaming about them. And that Rosa says, oh, well, this was my mistake. I shouldn't have been giving in to her. I read it in a parenting book. So now I know that I won't make that mistake, and I've hardened It specifically says, since then, she'd hardened the part of her heart that wanted to pamper her beloved daughter. As I said in a previous video, this episode really ramps up how important it is to understand the perspective you are in. This section feels written from the perspective of Rosa, not in the personal sense, not in the sense that it is saying I, because it often refers to her when talking about Rosa too, but it is written from Rosa's knowledge and Rosa's awareness. And in that sense, it is biased towards the idea that Rosa is doing the right thing to withhold from her daughter, while ignoring the idea that maybe Rosa's not listening to her daughter properly. The big thing that sets Rosa off is that Maria was asking for candy because she's excited about the idea of Halloween. She wants to have sweets so she can do her version of trick-or-treating, which is actually giving other people sweets. And this frustrates Rosa, partly because she thinks this seems childish, partly because she's told Maria no and Maria's kept asking. Part of the problem here is that she hasn't listened to Maria in the first place. It is not that Maria wants to eat sweets, which is the reason Rosa gives as her objection. Maria wants to do a fun festival thing with her cousins. She wants to buy these sweets and give them out to people. We see later that she warms up to Battler because he recognizes her wish to celebrate a holiday. And he understands what she wants and communicates with her on that level. Rosa, meanwhile, is too preoccupied with her own problems and her own stresses about the situation to try to listen to her daughter, and instead snaps at her and becomes very quickly violent with her. Speaking of the moment this happens on the train, when the old woman asks how old Maria is, this sets Rosa off somewhat. Now, this is because Rosa has an anxiety specifically about this. One of the things trauma does to a person, and one of the reasons trauma is harmful to a person, is it rewires your brain somewhat to be hypersensitive to what feel like warning signs and red flags. So, if you have been harmed around specific things, you will then be hypersensitive to what feels like signs of that harm, even if they might be incredibly innocuous things. This old woman asks how old Maria is, because she is just making conversation and thinking, oh, what a cute girl, and not in any way trying to slight Rosa. Later in this same section, we will see Ava ask how old is Maria again, in a way where she is trying to slight Rosa. She is trying to assert that Rosa has done a bad job as a mother, and this is where Rosa's worry about this and her whole complex around Maria seeming like a child, like a baby, this is where it comes from. Because then, yet again, just a little while later, Kyrie will ask how old Maria is, and Rosa once again tenses up until Kyrie makes it clear that she is not trying to insult her, and Kyrie has to very explicitly say, I'm trying to connect with you here as another mother of a daughter. We should talk more about that. We should have more of a relationship. I am genuinely trying to reach out to you here. I am not digging at you. And Rosa is able to understand in that context, because Kyrie is probably quite aware of the ways in which Ava says those things, and also Rosa is in a less stressful situation where she is not immediately being wound up about being late, about Maria hounding her, and all sorts of other stresses happening simultaneously on the train. And it feels very important and very depressing. The portrait of Maria and Rosa and the observation of other people and the bystanders around them, because everyone watches, everyone's shocked, and nobody intervenes on the train. Obviously, it is a tense and difficult situation, but it's still also sad for Maria that this is and will continue to be the state of things. In episode 4, we're going to get a very long dive into Maria's home life, and people effectively don't help her there either. We will see attempts being made, and we will know that they ultimately go nowhere. Likewise here, people's attention on Rosa is a deterrent and makes her then hold back, but only temporarily while people's eyes are literally on her. As soon as she gets off the train and on the platform and isn't even aware that she is still being observed, she goes straight back to slapping Maria, and then only stops when someone finally intervenes. But the narration makes a note that they probably didn't want to have to intervene at all, but felt compelled to because of how long she had been there, slapping her child in front of everyone. At which point, we hit the complete shitty cycle of how Rosa abuses Maria. Because there is a distinct life cycle to how this works. Rosa is stressed or frustrated or just has negative emotions about something. Maria behaves as a pretty normal child, maybe a neuroatypical child, but honestly that is not even part of the real issue here. Maria is not at fault even slightly. But Maria behaves as normal, and in some way that frustrates Rosa. At which point all of Rosa's frustrations turn to the one thing she feels she can affect a response to, and she will abuse Maria. At which point she loses control. She unleashes her frustrations, and as we see on the train, she will leave the train to continue if she feels uncomfortable in the moment. She has to finish the episode so she can release the tension, at which point she will feel ashamed. She will apologize to Maria. She will appease Maria by, for instance, buying sweets. But she does not make amends. She does not recognize her own failures. She does not recognize how Maria was not at fault. She is only concerned with the immediacy of her guilt and shame and expunging those. Because later this same day, we will see Rosa getting frustrated with Maria again. And we will see Rosa saying, "Didn't I even buy you those stupid sweets?" Reframing this as a favor for Maria, as her relenting and deciding to do a nice thing for Maria. Because this is not her making amends, realizing a mistake she has made and trying to make up for it. This is her going, "Oh, I did a bad thing, I have to do a good thing to offset it." And then only ever thinking about the good thing she has done, and never recognizing how she is repeatedly perpetuating this cycle. She will acknowledge that she has done the bad thing again, but she is not acknowledging the cycle that she continues to pull them through. And that ultimately, to fix this situation, she needs to deal with it. She needs to deal with her own self and her own coping mechanisms, because at the moment they are just harming Maria, and Maria has no power to fix this. It's heartbreaking to see Maria hugging Rosa in this moment of appeasement and being happy that her mother has come back, because this is the same mother, and we know that this isn't going to stay, and we know that not hours later is she going to yet again get frustrated with Maria. Rosa didn't go away. Rosa's the same mother as ever. She only feels like Maria's mother when the guilt and shame compels her to try and make up with Maria in a completely dysfunctional way. And the last note on the scene, promise you I'm done with it now. As they go to get the sweets, the narration also points out that their faces are both red and swollen, and they have been crying, and Rosa will at the very least need time to fix her makeup before she can go see the family. Because she needs to cover over this trauma, to cover over these negative emotions, and hide them as she goes to the family conference. Because no one can know or acknowledge the situation, despite the fact that, given Rosa's inability to be in control, it's likely the others do know, at least to some extent. There's a lot of brief scenes here where there's a lot of the board being set up. One thing I want to flag that I don't have a lot to say about, but I feel will become important as we start to pull together the thread of how the murder happens this time. Genji talks about how they must conduct themselves in a manner suitable for a very important guest. I do not think he means battler, even though other people refer to an important guest and mean battler. Genji is telling Shannon and Kanon that Beatrice will be there. This is Genji beginning the narrative and beginning the display of Beatrice physically in the mansion that will upend battlers' understanding of what's happening on this island. Obviously, yet again, Genji is going to be key to the murders that Beatrice is enacting, but it is interesting to know how quickly and how early he is setting that narrative to Shannon and Kanon. To jump forward to happier Maria times, there's it's very funny, the foreshadowing and blatant cluing of Kanon appearing to Maria first, having seen Rosa destroying Maria's candy, having seen the whole scene, having witnessed the entire scene Rosa made there, and saying that, Kanon offering his candy to Maria, saying his is even similar, but that Maria wants her own one, and then wishes Beatrice could do it. This of course means that Beatrice, from Kanon, has access to all the information she would need to step forward, has a candy that is similar to Maria's, and knows what happened between Maria and Rosa in that scene. This is all setting up for Beatrice to come back and use magic to revive Maria's sweet so that Maria will feel like it is her own sweet and not a new one. We're gonna get to this later too with Sakutaro, but basically one of the gifts magic can give by being a narrative force and being a force that fills in the gaps that are not known as objective facts. They can create magical situations and they can mend things in a roundabout way. We will see next episode that you cannot literally fix something with magic. However, Beatrice is able to give Maria her sweet back perfectly revived by magic, not because she is physically recovering and reconstructing the sweet, but because she is taking Maria's belief and giving some joy back to her that was stepped on by her mother. And not only that, later Maria says she has to wait for Beatrice because Beatrice will be there soon. And on a reread, you have to wonder, why does Maria know that? Why does Maria think Beatrice will be there soon? If not because perhaps Kanon told her, or even Beatrice in Kanon's form. And then, if Beatrice was there, why wouldn't she stay there? It's because she needs to go get changed. Because as much as Maria will accept Beatrice in any form or dress, she knows that she needs to look the part for the other family members to see her and clock her as Beatrice. Which flows neatly into a thing that recurs both here with Rosa, with Kyrie, and even with Shannon later. Beatrice at no point introduces herself to people. She always just smirks and asserts that they know who she is, and that expecting her to introduce herself is a challenge or a slight in and of itself. And this is very important because Beatrice in this episode is demonstrating what it means to be a different person. She is demonstrating how Battler's conception of there being only 18 people on the island is deeply flawed in several ways. And one of the reasons for this is, as much as people would assert that a person is a body, they are fully ready to believe in Beatrice as an independent person when presented in this way, with no other prompting from Beatrice. Beatrice is not trying to sell them on the idea that she is Beatrice. She is merely embodying herself and presenting herself in front of people and letting them draw their own conclusions. If she was constantly introducing herself and saying, "Yes, I am the Golden Witch," in a certain sense, that undermines the credibility of her argument that it is self-evident that she is a different person. It does not matter that she has the same body as Shannon and Kanon, because when wearing that dress, when acting that way, when being respected and shown in the way Genji does, when being respected and shown in by Genji as a clearly important guest, she is a distinct person, and it requires no claim that she is a distinct person because it is so obvious. And in this scene, and in later aftermath, Rosa is especially shell-shocked because she has seen a previous incarnation of Beatrice in an event that's clearly also traumatic for her, in an event she has clearly tried to repress and pretend didn't happen, didn't truly happen, maybe was a childish fantasy she invented, because she has never seen or heard proof of it being real, in a way that has haunted her. We'll get to that more once the dinner arrives and Rosa confesses what happened, but in this moment, we just know that Rosa is aware of a Beatrice being on the island, but the idea that she could still be alive and could look exactly the same, or the same age, blows her mind and makes her frazzled and unable to really conceive of what's going on. Also, when Kyrie meets her, it is funny that Kyrie tries to do some cop shit to very politely be like, "Oh, I'm sorry, is this not our first time meeting? Have we met before, perhaps?" She's clearly trying to simultaneously be polite but extract information out of Beatrice, and Beatrice knows what's up and is just like, "You know who I am. Goodbye." Battler on the board just taking a nap because Battler in the tea party room is just observing and waiting so he can make moves is very funny because, hey, it's just funny anyway, but also it really belies his absence and passivity to key elements of the story Beatrice is trying to tell him. He is being a really bad reader in this moment because he is sitting here going, "I don't care about all this character stuff, get to the murders." Even though all of the character stuff is crucial to understanding the murders and the murderer. He feels like he's already seen it once, so he's just waiting for Beatrice to get to the new moves where he can have logic puzzles to untangle. And this will be even worse as Beatrice tries to tell him her backstory and he's like, "Don't distract me with this, just keep killing people so I can prove that you're not a witch." And he will eventually warm up to understanding his need to be understanding, but it's not happening here. In the tea party room, there is a funny part where Beatrice says, "Rosa saw the golden butterflies. Are you going to just explain away anything you can't? Are you just going to dismiss anything you can't explain as trivial?" Which is a problem because, as far as I'm concerned, the trick Beatrice pulls is pretty simple, which is she throws up Maria's smushed up sweet, then when it falls in her hand, she actually gives Maria the sweet Kanon tried to offer her already, claiming that it's the same one. The butterflies then just feel like a nonsense flourish. She has clearly not actually rigged up some sort of particle effect to come out of her hand. And my assertion would have been that the butterflies are a non-real thing that are just a flourish to describe the ways in which Rosa is dumbfounded and the magic that is happening in front of Rosa's face. Because as Maria is receiving a magical trick that is giving her her sweet back, Rosa is simultaneously seeing a woman she killed return. So, if in the comments you have a more literal or concrete understanding of what the butterflies mean coming out of Beatrice's hand that I am dismissing, I would love to hear that. And lastly, there's been a lot of tiny details I've skipped over from this section, but I think I've covered the broad stuff pretty well. But to end with, this last video ends with Rosa swearing that she would not leave Maria alone until they left this island, because she's worried about Beatrice making contact with Maria. And to tie off a segment from earlier, Rosa can be an abusive mother and still love her child. Those are not irreconcilable things. They are just complicated and messy and also don't cancel each other out. I know this episode will have a lot of Maria and Rosa, and this in particular feels like an important flag for understanding the how of the murder for later, because going forward, I am going to assume that Rosa and Maria are with each other at all times, unless very explicitly separated. What this means for the murder, we'll find out pretty soon. We're rocketing towards the dinner, the explosive scene there, and then the aftermath as we have another first Twilight. But we're not there yet. So until next time, thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.